5 points back of Liverpool. English tabloids talking about City being over. It's so not over, is it?
No, of course it's not over.
It's a trap, people. Let's be candid.
I think the better question is, how many points do you need to be ahead of Manchester City to actually withstand their inevitable surge?
We back! Like Mike Tyson. What a weekend of Premier League action. Charging towards this international break on Remembrance Sunday. 4 of the top 5 drop points amidst scenes almost as epic as the ever bigger poppies. And Liverpool left feeling ecstasy. Indeed, Opta's supercomputer is now giving Mikel Arteta's Arsenal just a 3.5% chance of winning the title. Chelsea down to 0.2. Everybody else on 0 chance of winning the league, apart from City and Liverpool now. But what does the supercomputer know? Because we got someone much more data-driven and truth-telling than that number-chewing Halland-esque robot. Live from Harrogate, Yorkshire. Oh, the pride of British journalism, the Pedro Neto of words. Oh, now from The Athletic, they come for all of us. It's my friend, Mr. Rory Smith.
Hello, how are you doing?
Oh, how am I doing is a complicated question that I don't think we got time to get into. It's been quite a week here in the United States, and I don't know if you noticed, but I did find it fascinating as we deal with the election and the aftermath and frankly, the shifting tectonic plates across the planet as a result. England, stay with me here, listeners, has been obsessed with one thing and one thing only, which would be the size of the son of a 1990s pop star, Gary Barlow, guy from a boy band called Take That, essentially kind of roughly English Backstreet Boys. He posted a photo of his family in 2023, but it went viral this week because his kid, Daniel, who is 24, looks, compared to the rest of his family, like just an enormous giant from fairy tales. And now everyone in Britain, everyone, that's all they're talking about, which is both terrifying and reassuring in equal measure. Raw, can you explain to us, when the rest of the world is poised in panic, the United Kingdom is essentially marvelling at just a giant baby?
Yeah, I think there's something very funny about that concept of the adult son. And I think, it was something that was popularised during the first Trump presidency. But the Gary Barlow's massive son thing was...
he's everywhere now, right? Even on sports shows, they're like talking about Gary Barlow's massive son.
It's just captivating. I had to really restrain myself twice from referring to, the Champions League and Europa League tables that go down to 36, from referring to them as the Gary Barlow's massive son of league tables. Because that compared to like normal league tables, they're the same size as Gary Barlow's massive son. I think it ticks a lot of British boxes, this. So one, Gary Barlow is legitimately famous in Britain. Like he is, you call him a 1990s pop star, which is true, but he had a level of fame in the 1990s that means he is enduringly famous. Now, Take That have got back together at least once. They're still quite big. He is beloved to at least one, if not two, separate generations, Gary Barlow. He's a popular guy, but he's not the
We'll
sort
save
of person...
that for another podcast today in 1990s boys band. That debate, Gary Barlow famous or not, we'll give him fame. So
Rog,
massive figure.
That podcast would be an absolute banger, let me tell you. Let's workshop it.
We are in a way.
He's not the sort of person you think about on a day-to-day basis, but he has that kind of resonance that means he's familiar to literally everybody.
Okay, number one. Number two.
Then there was something just so wholesomely mad about the photo. It's a perfectly normal family photo shot. They're obviously on holiday somewhere. Lovely family, Gary Barlow, handsome man, beautiful wife, really, really nice daughter, really nicely dressed. And then just his son looks like he's been supersized, effectively. And I think, and this is important, as far as anybody knows, Daniel Barlow is just quite tall, and Gary Barlow and the rest of his family, I suspect, are not that tall. It's not.
I looked it up, by the way, for stats freaks.
Go on.
The ginormous son of Gary Barlow, Daniel. I feel like I'm now in a law procedural on television. Objection overruled. He's only 6'2", but his dad's 5'7", so he looks essentially like English Shaquille O'Neal.
I mean, that is shorter than me, Rog. So that is not even that tall. But the perspective of it just made it look so remarkable that it was hard not to look at it and notice, oh wow, he's massive.
This video podcast is brought to you by Camarena, the most awarded tequila. And if you're watching this on YouTube, remember to hit that subscribe button, turn your notifications on so you don't miss any of our upcoming podcasts and our exclusive interviews with Premier League stars all season long. The question is, Raw, though, to understand why this came out now, this photo from a year ago, I think, and this is why I'm banging on about it, dear listeners, I think if we can get this, I think it's for you, Factor 3 that's coming up, Raw. I think we may understand what is going on with the world, what's right about it, what's wrong about it. We'll also understand the essence of modern Britain, this answer. I don't like to pile pressure on you, Raw. But essentially, I do believe like the fact that amidst all of this global debate and intrigue, Britain's essentially like, he's a big boy, Gary Barlow said. Essentially makes the whole nation just look like some kind of medieval village, which I love.
But you have to factor in, so 1, familiar celebrity. 2, something that looks a bit weird. 3, people in Britain love calling people big lad. And 4, it
Big
came...
Sam! Big Daniel Barlow, is that just what it introduced to? We just like saying the big lad.
It's just a country, we just love labelling stuff big. But 4, it happened on US election day on social media as the entire place just seemed to be arguing and doubting and squabbling and occasionally doing things that are worse than squabbling. And Britain, I think, just latched onto this idea that Gary Barlow has a massive son. Just as a balm for the soul. It made us all feel better. It was, and you don't say this very often anymore, it was Twitter at its best. It was what Twitter used to be when it was funny and light-hearted and things would capture the imagination. And people really liked it. We don't want to be arguing all the time. We want to think, Gary Barlow's got a massive son and that's quite funny.
There you are. I think you've got it. It's like half the planet is debating whether we're on a trajectory that's going to lead to the apocalypse. The other half is like, this is the greatest day ever for assorted reasons. And what you're saying is the whole of Britain's just essentially putting its finger in its ears and just going, la, 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 not listening. Gary Barlow's got a massive son.
Exactly, because ultimately that's much more enjoyable.
And that, dear young listeners especially, that is to how to go through life. Just revelling in family photos of 1990s former boy band pop stars and just feeling better about life by reveling in theirs. I think we've cracked something there. I'm not exactly sure what it is, old Raw, but let's start by raising a toast for the first Michelob Ultra of the day.
To Gary Barlow's massive son.
Well, to someone who is as enormous as Gary Barlow's massive son, both in real life and also optically in this moment, it would be Mr. Bradley Guzan, that great American and Atlanta United goalkeeper who shocked and stunned Lionel Messi and Inter Miami, winning 3-2 to clinch the best of 3 playoff series. Gary Barlow's massive son could never dump the big brand, high-profile, biggest spending MLS team of all time out of the playoffs in a way that I believe will cause quite a headache for everyone at MLS headquarters. Don't know if you saw this, Raw. The moment of the game, 65th minute, Lionel Messi actually tied the game at 2-2 with a little header. Yes, a header, don't ask. And a stunned Brad Guzan was pushed deep into the bowels of his net by Leo Campana and then had Luis Suarez run up to him, point in his face like some kind of Uruguayan Nelson Muntz. But as they say in Atlanta, you come at the Guzan king, you best not miss. And Guzan proceeded to go dark Guzan, almost dad Guzan. He stopped everything just because. And Bartosz Schlich's header in the 76th minute proved to be the winner. Ecstasy in Atlanta. I will say the photograph of Brad Guzan finding time to laugh in Luis Suarez's face at full time may be the greatest image MLS has ever produced for the world. He who laughs last laughs into the suddenly oddly one game wins all conference semi-finals. Raw, quick one for you, and God bless you, Brad Guzan, who is one of the great guys. Is MLS on English fans' radars at all? Is it consumed how we consume like the Saudi leagues via occasional mad goals or of a banger or the own goal variety consumed on social media from far, far away?
Not massively, but probably it's cut through more than the Russian Saudi Pro League. Like, nobody watches the Russian Saudi Pro League in Britain. But you have to remember that we don't watch like French football, and we don't watch Italian football, and we don't watch Spanish football unless it's Real Madrid, Barcelona, and David Beckham's playing. Like, there's no real appetite for any sort of foreign football in Britain. I think Miami has massively increased the profile of MLS. And by the time the final rolls around, people are probably aware of what's going on. But in terms of actually watching it, not huge numbers as yet.
bite your arm off for where it's going on. You've essentially described Everton's game at West Ham, which we will get to.
Do we have to?
We do, because... oh my God, it was like the chronicle of a death foretold. We are going to get to all of that juicy football, but quick one reminder, Kansas City, we are coming to your magical kingdom. Sam Ewis and I will be in your burnt ends tinged city for a live show ahead of NWSL final, which is like 10 days, 11 days away, November 21st. We will host the first annual women's game, Night of 1,000 Stars. I need a sting for that when my voice goes echoey and deep. Presented by Ally at the Madrid Theatre. Tickets available now. Go to the link in our show notes on either the pod or on YouTube. Let's raise a glass and celebrate this incredible moment for the rise of the women's game in our nation. But now, to the Premier League football. Let's start in London for that rather angry pimple of a game that was Chelsea 1, Arsenal 1, a match. Honestly felt that we were entering must-win-ish territory, ... for Arsenal, after the quite confused and frustrating stretch in which they have stumbled. They've lacked confidence and potency, just 2 wins in the last 6. That confident fluency that's been their hallmark, it's been lost, almost replaced by existential self-doubt and the feeling of or the sound of a breath being held. But there was good news before this one, because, my lord, that prince, Martin Ødegaard, was back in the starting lineup for the first time since his injury at the end of August. A gamble to insert him, but this was a game in which everybody bloody played, whether fit or not. Cole Palmer and his knock, get in there. Declan Rice and his broken toe, you can start. And despite all the walking wounded, the game began at octane. Chelsea trying to break through the lines in pulses. Neto tormenting Ben White. Arsenal imposing themselves in possession, but lacking in creativity. It was really possession of the sterile variety for long stretches. The game, bitty, scrappy, feisty. Ødegaard understandably rusty. Players like Martinelli and Ben White low on confidence, low on impact. And for a team guilty at times of Saka over-dependence, Cucurella honestly had an excellent 90 minutes, smothering Bukayo. Chelsea, Caicedo, a clenched fist, tried to flicker, more muscle load than invention. Raw, was this a case of like both teams neutralising each other without creating much?
Yeah, I think that these games tend to be very, very finely poised, don't they? Because there isn't ultimately on paper, not even on paper, on grass, when it comes down to those 90 minutes. There's not a vast amount in terms of ability or organisation that separates Chelsea from Arsenal. So over the course of the season, you'd expect Arsenal to be able to produce that more consistently, to produce it more reliably. But when they're kind of confronted with each other, I don't think they're vastly different as teams at the moment.
That is essentially the truth of the whole game. There was a delicious moment. Kai Havertz thought he'd fired the Gunners into the lead, did a quasi-non-celebration and decided to hush his old team's fans before being shushed himself by VAR for being offside. Arteta had talked about the factor he believed had bedeviled his team the most this season, the inability to find goals on the road, not just goals, but honestly to summon shots. So it was almost an immense relief rather than the joy in the second half that the Gunners struck first on the hour mark. And it was the returning hero, Ødegaard, floating a hopeful ball to the back post. Gab Martinelli, a player who struggled as much as anyone, bleeding confidence, controlled first the pass, then struck a speculative early shot, kind of crackled past the frozen Sanchez at his near post. Gab Martinelli, third goal of the season, Raw. He's taken a lot of the criticism from Arsenal fans in recent weeks. I actually filmed with him last week, and he talked with some real honesty about what it feels to score a goal after a long drought. He said it feels like no other goal. That interview will go up on YouTube, I think on Tuesday, and I felt true joy for him in that moment. He needed this. Arsenal needed this. First away goal since September. I think the one at City. First in open play since August on the road, Raw, which kind of tells you all you need to know from an Arsenal perspective about the story of the season.
Yeah, and it's been particularly bad away from home, but I think that whether they are at the Emirates or not, Arsenal have looked a little bit less creative, a little bit less imaginative, more kind of stilted than we've come to expect from them. But for Martinelli in particular, it hits his confidence if he's not scoring goals, but it also disrupts the balance of Arsenal, because ultimately, although kind of Bukayo Saka is the star boy, he's the headline act of that attacking trident. You need them both to be considered a threat for things to work. And what made Arsenal such a force last season was that in the games when Saka didn't deliver, Martinelli did tend to pick up the slack and provide that cutting edge. If they've got both of them, Arsenal will beat pretty much everybody. On just one, it becomes slightly more finely balanced.
Talking about balance, Maresca countered by Sention, Enzo Fernandez and Michailo Mudryk up the tempo. Enzo actually involved in the equaliser in the 70th minute, rolled the ball to the quite versatile Neto, who, it's beautiful to watch him, just saw the space, exploded into the space, onto the ball, outwitted, outpaced first Martinelli, then Timber, and utterly just lashed a shot. I loved how it just whistled centimetres past Gabriel's quite ample buttocks. A vicious, low, smoking drive, light speed whip and Nene, enough to catch out the quite magical David Raya on the day. His team so dominant, but even he couldn't get to this one. And Neto, what a footballer. First goal for Chelsea in the league. I think he unfurled at least 4 celebrations by my count to market. There was the fingers in the ears, there was the hush, there was the ecstatic jump and fist pump. The goal was so emphatic, Raw. I think it honestly deserved each and every one of them.
Is it Neto who set the record for the most celebrations in one celebration a couple of years ago playing for Wolves? Did he do 9?
You're mixing me up with Opta, who I know count these things. Was it just 9, Raw?
I think it was. I'm prepared to.
It's like the Simone Biles of celebrations. Just watching him, just like you think she can't flip over anymore, and she just keeps going 3 or more. It's honestly as breathtaking. He is the Biles of cellies.
But I would say that the fingers in the ears followed by the hush gesture. Yep. Doesn't make any sense. Just once your fingers are in the ears, why do they need to be quiet? You can't hear anyways.
I always think that's I'm not listening to you. I'm also not going to talk myself. I think they're two.
Oh, do you think that's what it's just? He just wants complete silence.
Let's just have complete silence.
Yeah, okay. He just wants to kind of attune himself to the universe. I would be inclined to do the hush gesture, followed by the fingers in the ears, possibly followed by a large finger.
The finger up the nose is and under the ears, the mouth. Obviously, you got to get your hat to. You got to do the nasal probing.
Having spent all day with my 2-year-old, I wonder, could you do head, shoulders, knees, toes, eyes, ears, mouth, nose? That might be the way to do it. That gets 8 in.
Yeah. The thing listeners are waiting for us to say anal cavity probing. Guys, come on.
So I really like Pedro Neto as a player. I think he's fantastic. I think he's of the many Chelsea signings, he's in the that was a good idea column. Has Pedro Neto faced any intense criticism from anybody at any point in his career? I'm not sure he has. So why are you doing the fingers in the ears hush gestures? Doesn't make any sense.
The anti-Pedro Neto lobby.
Famously kind of
big
vocal
anti-Neto.
lobby.
Yeah, they rule the world. By the way, I watched that goal and I was like, from an Arsenal POV, it was such an exquisite goal. I don't know who you actually do blame for that. I think there will be frustration to take the game by the scruff of the neck with a goal and then concede it. To fail to control it is probably an agony that will haunt Mikel Arteta. Knowing him, he'll probably be walking around all international break just being like, "Raw, it's the pickpockets. I need better pre-season pickpockets."
Or is Win the Dog? You know, do we need to conduct a performance review on Win the Dog?
It's never Win the Dog's fault. Please don't say Win the Dog's going to get it. I'm not sure I could live in that world. But it was an anxious moment for Arsenal. Saka, then clattered by Cucurella, had to limp off. Gunners fans await the medical report there, no doubt. For Chelsea, Cole Palmer, another big game in which he was essentially marked out of the impact. Just as against Liverpool, Chelsea felt so much less in that final third because of his mute button. But despite that, the end was rather frenzied, frantic football played by very well-intended, very motivated, very tired, very beat-up men, to be honest. Huge credit to Ødegaard, who kept driving his team on until the very end. Brutal miss at the death, cross low, and Trossard, poor Trossard, took it off Havertz's toe with a goal beckoning, leaving Arteta utterly bereft in the Natalie Imbruglia position, lying naked and ashamed on the floor, a bit like Hasselhoff chasing a burger in days of yore. At the final whistle, Raw, Peter Drury in comms declared the draw. What a great phrase, Drury. Hats off. He said, "We'll trigger mutual dissatisfaction." Is that a fair way to sum it up?
Not entirely, because I think Chelsea, in the cold light of day, would be relatively pleased with it. You know, obviously Arsenal went into the season as title contenders. Chelsea was seen as a mess. They are now above Arsenal in the table after 11 games. Their form has dwindled a little bit the last few weeks, but they have done far better than most people expected. They're in the mix for a Champions League spot. That's kind of where they wanted to be. And having gone behind in a very, very finely balanced game, you take a point, it's okay. They won't be entirely delighted by it. I don't think there'll be a party, but that wasn't a bad result for Chelsea.
I totally agree, by the way, with that. I mean, they must be elated, Chelsea fans, to be third. You know, and also the joy of forcing your way back into a game after conceding. I mean, I think there's probably a level of frustration that they still have not delivered a signature win. One that would have been Maresca's first against a Big Six opponent. They were beaten by City. They were beaten by Liverpool. So I guess in that context, Raw, a point is progress, a first point in a big game. But you were about to talk about Arsenal.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're right on Chelsea, though. I think that we're very impatient generally, and it is only 11 games into Enzo Maresca's time at Chelsea. The work he's done so far is astonishing.
It is astonishing.
He is way ahead of where I expected him to be. You're very much a Maresca believer.
I'm a wanna-be Maresca. I spent time with him ahead. He's a decent, deeply smart. I think the chess thing won me over as much as anything. But just a doubt that no one can do this job. That's what we said. He's no top flight experience. And then there was the ridiculous one before. He wasn't even that good at Leicester. Was a tiny echo. I think, yes, Chelsea fans, that was probably from the mighty anti-Neto lobby. But there was so much nonsense talked about him. I find it humanly deeply rewarding. But Arsenal, Raw, just 5 wins off their opening 11 games. By the way, same number as the likes of Fulham and Brentford. You can make the case by not losing, they've stemmed that negative freefall going into the international break. And with all that edu noise, the surprise front office defection, really, and the lack of potency on the field, where are you right now for Arsenal? They've dropped points, I think, in 6 of their last 9 Premier League games, which is quite extraordinary. Is it just the sense of a dip? And we can say nothing to see here, or is it something more akin? I mean, this is where the tabloid media have started to drumbeat, almost to will this narrative that this is a team who peaked without ever reaching the desired or expected heights.
But the thing is, we can't know that, can we? Because we're only 11 games into the season. That is, as I say, English football now is a really impatient culture, and I think that's really important to remember. And it didn't, to be honest, this will sound alien to younger listeners, but it didn't used to be like this. You know, the teams did used to be allowed to have little blips in form, and they did get not even particularly poor runs of results. Like you've drawn at Chelsea, that's not a bad result. Drawing at Chelsea for Arsenal, drawing at home to Liverpool, a little bit disappointing, but it's a clash of 2 of the top 3 or 4, say. So again, not a disaster. The defeat at Bournemouth will hurt. That I think would always have been a relatively bad result. Losing at Newcastle can happen. Newcastle are quite good. But now, obviously, 4 games. They've not won in the league since early October. You kind of look at it and think, well, this is disastrous. This is Arsenal are finished. Sack Arteta. Fire all the players. Replace the Cronkies. The problem that Arsenal have, I say this with experience, I think like personal experience. When you're competing with City, everything feels like do or die all of the time. And you could see a little bit in the game yesterday. There were just, before the goal came, before Arsenal took the lead, there were little moments where you could tell they were getting slightly more frenzied than drawing 0-0 at Stamford Bridge warranted. And I think it's the sense that they've had a bad run, they need to put it right immediately, they're under pressure because they know that there are limited amounts of slip-ups that you can afford, because you've already lost ground to City. Not that much ground to City, they're only 4 points back, but it's 4 points in November, and we have seen in the past that those gaps can become chasms pretty quickly. And I think the challenge Arsenal have this season that they didn't have last season is they're going to have to try and catch Manchester City and potentially Liverpool, but certainly Manchester City. And that means that every single game has this incredible weight on it, and you're putting yourself under this intense psychological pressure every time anything goes against you. That's the big issue for me with Arsenal. The
unbearable lightness of being Arsenal at a time when Manchester City exist. We'll talk about them in a minute, and they're far from perfection. But I am actually more and more convinced week to week that Arsenal are just a late. I'm expecting Mr. Beast to just announce it. Arsenal are just a stunt that he's pulled off. Watching them, loving them, supporting them is such an emotionally spectacular human experience. I can imagine. I mean, more so than like I spent 50 hours buried alive, or I saved 100 dogs from dying. So stay the course, Arsenal fans. I do believe life, or I hope life will be all the richer for the journey. But from Arsenal pain to struggle of an altogether more unfamiliar type, this happened. Brighton and Hove Albion 2. Manchester City 1. This is real. Manchester City entering a game in the Premier League on the back of 3 straight losses, which sounds terrible, but yes, they were scattered across 3 competitions. Won the Carabao, who cares? They giggled after that one. Won a drubbing against Sporting of Ruben Amorim fame. More on him later. That one was optically humiliating, but it was in the Champions League, in that new big gulp format, which makes a loss barely a blip. But the form has been oddly vulnerable, and they were facing up to scrappy-do Brighton, unbeaten at home Brighton. For City, injuries have corroded form. Pep had to unbox 19-year-old Jamal Simpson-Pusey at the back. He delivered, I think, a quite assured debut performance in the circumstances. To be honest, though, we had no idea what was coming from the off. City took the field. If you actually look at the game again, Haaland took the field with just a grim, determined look. It took him just 23 minutes to act on that. Kovacic slipped him through in between the 2 central defenders, smashed the rebound off his safe shot, in off the crossbar. We marvel at him so often. I think he became the fastest ever player to 75 league goals in just 77 games. When you hear these statistics, by the way, it's like hearing a golfer tell you that they went around an 18-hole golf course in like 18 shots. Jenner's had just 1 goal in 5 games, but despite that barren spell, Raw, he still had 15 goals in 16 games this season alone, which is mind-bending.
Yeah, and it kind of shows the ruthlessness with which Haaland operates, and also the standards he set for himself, because it felt like he wasn't being quite as effective, quite as efficient as he had been previously. The one thing I will say with Haaland is, if you look at his XG, so his expected goals, he has been outperforming it this season, which A, is testament to what a great finisher he is, and perhaps, the models can't quite account for just how good Erling Haaland is in front of goal, or quite how much he can turn a relatively low value opportunity into a high value opportunity through being a sort of Viking robot. But it does also suggest that City aren't creating quite as many chances as it looked like they were, that perhaps there was an underlying problem that Haaland was not necessarily papering over, but was disguising to some extent. There is a point at which even a striker as good as Haaland is reliant on his teammates to create chances for him. He can't do it all by himself. And City hadn't been creating those for Erling quite as much as they used to do.
By the way, that point just kind of hits the yes, but anybody could score the number of goals that Haaland scores in City's system. Just ask yourself, could Gary Barlow's giant son get his leg up as high as Erling did on so many of those chances? Then rest the post, Haaland, not Gary Barlow's giant son, with a drive moments later. Gotta say, Brighton, this first half, when you watch it again, they afforded City so much respect, so much time, so much space. City just enjoyed passing through the seagulls over and over and over. But the Brighton fans kept singing. Energy in the Amex never, ever wavered. They brought on a half-time 20-year-old Cameroonian, Carlos Baliba, at the start of the second half. The kid brought in to replace Caicedo, who's already turning heads with the likes of Arsenal and Liverpool looking at him. His impact was immense. Played the ball beautifully on the half turn, just fearlessly started to tear through the City midfield with courage and no respect at all. City, actually, you could see the moment early on in that second half where they began to flinch whenever he took possession, dropping deeper and deeper. Brighton kept attacking down City's right. Kyle Walker, who's been playing ever more like modern day Herschel Walker over and over. Brighton honestly could have scored 3 or 4 here. I think Ruta headed over, freshly returned from injury. João Pedro sliced wide, 78th minute, though, slop in the box. City unable to get the ball out, and it was João Pedro. So good to have him back. Swooped on the ball, drilled home, mouthing at the camera, "I'm back." But what changed for Brighton, Rook? Because they could hardly lay a glove on City in that first half, but in the second they were just buccaneering.
Yeah, and it's tempting to say it's to do with individuals, that Belieber in particular seemed to really grab the game by the scruff of the neck, just kind of drove Brighton forward, knitted everything together. We've seen all season how good Brighton can be, and I think crucially they've kind of shown to themselves and to everybody else that you can overcome adversity relatively late on. They obviously came back from what, in terms of the scoreline, was a worse position against Tottenham, a month ago, just before the last international break, I think. They keep going, they have a clear identity, they know what they're doing, and then you get someone like Belieber on, who's playing really well, who gives them that sort of drive and that thrust, and they can do you damage. But the problem with football is that there's two teams on the pitch who have agency, and so it's difficult to know to what extent it's Brighton asserting themselves, or Man City doing whatever the opposite of asserting yourself is, and shrinking in on themselves in that second half, because they didn't seem quite as confident, quite as blissfully serene as they had in the first.
That sentence, Manchester City shrinking in on themselves, I didn't think I'd live to see the day. I didn't think I'd get to say this. It would get worse for Manchester City. We honestly don't say that enough anymore. João Pedro, turn provider, slipping in Matt O'Reilly to control and finish, truly madly deeply. What an emotional moment for that London-born Danish international. His first appearance for Brighton, he injured himself substantially after a horror tackle back in August, I think against Crawley, to return and deliver against the defending champions. I mean, God, O'Reilly in ecstasy, Brighton in ecstasy, City woozy. Gvardiol got his angles all wrong with a diving header, unable to be the late hero for City yet again on this day. And at the death, Haaland and Van Hecke had a little rumble of some shirt pulling, with some short pulling. It's very UFC ground game, bit Ariel Helwani crossover territory, as the Brighton fans serenaded Guardiola with a quite wonderful and surreal "you're getting sacked in the morning" chant. What a memory this game will be for Brighton supporters. They deserve this. Their record's been dastardly against Manchester City. I think their only previous win was in 2021. This was a massive moment for their manager, Hertzler. What impressed me most about him was how he reacted at the final whistle, shaking hands with Pep, barely a flicker of emotion, as if all of this was no big deal, that they had a plan, they executed their plan. That kind of mentality where they expect victory is utterly elite. You know, they'd had close back-to-back losses against Liverpool, to not show their scars but just rise up and knock out Man City with all the precision of Steve Kornacki if he was a footballer. This was unwavering faith, unwavering belief level vibes, Ro.
Yeah, and it's incredible that Hertzler is, still only, 4 months into this job, and is still in his early 30s. He's by some distance the youngest manager in the Premier League, far younger than Ruben Amorim, who's coming into Manchester United at 30.
Yeah, when you said 4 months, I'm just nodding along, like with no surprise. I thought you were saying he's just 4 months old. I'm like, yes,
yeah,
a Premier League managerial baby.
He has been a human for just 4 months. No, he's an incredibly young manager in both senses, and for him to come into Brighton, who did spend a lot of money in the summer, that shouldn't be forgotten, from St. Pauli, so a second division German team. Didn't have any top flight managerial experience. He's come into Brighton, who were upwardly mobile in the Premier League. Anyway, De Zerbi, Potter, they've had some really good managers, and they are now expected really to finish in the top half of the Premier League table. That seems to be their kind of bar, if not get into Europe. And Hertzler's come in at 32 with the sort of CV that a lot of players, certainly older ones, people like Danny Welbeck, James Milner, they might be slightly suspicious of. But he has, in the space of 4 months, won all of those players over. He's finessed all of those new signings into the team. He's given them a new, updated identity, not massively dissimilar to the sort of football they were playing under De Zerbi, which wasn't massively different to the football they were playing under Potter. A lot of the basic principles are still the same, because ultimately, there's only so many ways you can play football.
That's what Brighton do.
Yeah, it's what they're designed to do, to manage those transitions between managers. And he's got at least 2. You talked about signature wins with Chelsea. Hertzler's got 2. So they beat Spurs coming from behind, and now they've beaten Manchester City. And yeah, do you know what? They probably should have beaten Liverpool last week as well. So for him to do all of that in 4 months, to get to the stage now where there is no question that no one is going to say at any point, Fabian Hertzler is too inexperienced to be a Premier League manager. He has proved within 4 months that he absolutely belongs at this level. It may go sour from here. He may not fulfil all of his ambitions. You don't know. He might fulfil more of them. But he's proved he can cut it, in this case, against the very best manager in the world.
Sweet, delicious treat. We were served a pep going ear to ear with an opposition player at the final whistle. Quite excellent. Jean-Paul Van Hecker. Lip readers said, Pep said something to the effect of, "You're a crying baby." He said something more articulate post-game. He said after 6 titles, maybe another team deserves one. Slightly sneering, slightly patronising. He said, "We are not finished yet. I love a challenge. I won't step back more than ever. I want to do it. People want our era to be over." Who are people, Pep? But we are here. Raw, 5 points back of Liverpool. English tabloids talking about City being over. It's so not over, is it? Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor, Raw?
No, of course it's not over. I mean, it's only 5 points and City play Liverpool in about 3 weeks' time. So by that stage, it might only be 2. City might be ahead of Liverpool by that stage. It's really, really early. As I say, football is an impatient culture. City have hit a blip, no question. It is a longer type of blip than the blip they normally have in the autumn. They always have a little dodgy spell in what Americans call the fall. Tends to be kind of late October, early November. This one fits perfectly. The differences are that this one has gone on for a bit longer. It's cost them more points. And they don't have quite as many injuries as everyone says they do, but they do have a sort of normal number of injuries in a very small squad, and that's a problem. But it's Manchester City, it's Pep Guardiola. You look at the quality they have. They will come out of it. It's not like we're going to be sat here in a month's time and saying City haven't won in 8. That's not going to happen.
I'm not falling for it, Raw. I am not. It's a trap. It's a trap, people. Let's be candid.
I think the better question is, how many points do you need to be ahead of Manchester City to actually withstand their inevitable surge?
And did you use a wooden stake to finish them off? These are all tactical questions. We have to wait till the end of the international window to find out. By the way, I had a dream last night, I crap you not. It was in some vivid detail. It's kind of amazing. I dreamt that Pep Guardiola invited me to come to City's training ground over the international break. And he was just like this frenzied, obsessed man. And what he wanted to show me, he'd identified the weakness in his team, the blip. He's like, "I've secured the blip." And he'd realised it was all about, don't know how he worked this out, it was all about the angles at which his players had been brushing their teeth. And so he was maniacally in the bathroom showing me around as all the City players were just grinding away at their molars as he bought these commands about toothbrush angle, toothbrush grip, brushing angle. And there were just players like Foden and Stones who were just desperately soaring away with precision. And then there were others like Grealish and Doku were just hiding in the corner with bleeding gums. What do you think that means, Raw?
I think Jack Grealish is probably really good at brushing his teeth.
I bet he flosses 3 times a day.
Jack Grealish flosses, 100%. You know that footballers go to the barbers a lot. They're quite vain, they're on TV all the time, they've got nothing else to do. I wonder how often they go to the dentist. God. I think probably quite a lot.
We filmed with a well-known Hollywood celebrity once, and just before the cameras went on, he shouted, "Teeth!" And he smiled, and he had a man whose sole job in life was to step in before cameras went on to make sure he didn't have spinach in his teeth. I bet you Jack Grealish. Yeah, I bet you Jack Grealish has got a teeth man. Teeth! Just loved the ability to shout that out. By the way, City fan at Rawson MCR had a simpler and probably more accurate analysis than my teeth and dentistry and orthodontistry Pep, although it does feel very believable. He tweeted, "Since effing Oasis said they were reforming, Man City's form has gone back to the late 1990s. We can only wish." City's implosion meant that Liverpool, losers of Lordy, just 1 game out of 16 this season, knew if they could win the late match up, they could move 5 bloody points. That's not a typo. 5 bloody points clear at the very top of the table. They welcome quite uncharacteristically flailing Villa. 3 straight losses, all comps, winless in 4, and win Liverpool did quite comfortably in the end. 2-0, a romp played out at a suddenly expectant Anfield, before whom Liverpool delivered, starting with Mo Salah on the break from a Villa corner, sprung by Big Verge. Leon Bailey trapped back, may have actually been punished for impeding Mo, but my lord, Darwin Núñez bailed out Liverpool, bailed out Villa in a way too, just ecstatically charged into possession and charged around Emi Martinez, and from a quite acute angle just got his body shape just perfect, slapped home. we've talked about this a couple of times, but this was a moment that reminded me of something you've told me, Raw. No striker is better at scoring when they don't have a single second to think about it, Raw. I mean, he went on to miss a couple of fine chances. The more I watch this man, the more I believe it's actually the thinking that does Darwin in.
Yeah, if you compare the first one-on-one, the goal, to the second one-on-one, which he put into Goodison Park, the difference is that his first touch, so Salah gets bundled over by Leon Bailey, David Coote, the referee, seems to be signalling as Salah gets wiped out that there's no foul, which is very strange. But Darwin Núñez gets the ball, takes a very heavy touch, and is suddenly in completely the wrong position. And whoever Liverpool striker coach is must have been tearing his hair out at that point, although, most coaches these days bald. So his kind of ghost hair out. And because Núñez is in that difficult position, he has to kind of contrive an impromptu, virtuoso, quite clever finish where he, instead of kind of slipping it past Martinez, he scoops it over him and back kind of towards the centre of the goal, scores a wonderful goal, well done Darwin. The second one, he sort of canters through with that vaguely equine run of his, and all he can see is this goal sort of coming closer and closer and closer and closer and closer, and he's just thinking, I don't know what to do, and so he slashes wildly at it because he's got all these different choices. And that is Núñez to a T, that with the first one, he gave himself no chance to think because his first touch was so bad. With the second one, he had all this time to think and he couldn't make his mind up. And you need to stop Darwin Núñez thinking.
Yeah, just boil this down to a life truth. Do not think, dear children. Thinking is danger. Free thinking is just the beginning of the end. By the way, I did notice, and if you don't know David Coote in Liverpool, just Google the video which just came out just before we started podding. It is quite remarkable. I actually thought it was AI generated when I first saw it. It was extraordinary. But Darwin, let's talk about nice things. Shoved the ball up his shirt, which I think is footballing language for we're about to have a little Darwin Jr. coming. Raw, is the world ready for chaos, baby?
Well, it's obviously something in the water at Liverpool at the moment, because I think Curtis Jones has had a baby as well. Do we need a second-generation Darwin Núñez? Yes. I think that's important to continue the franchise.
If the world can survive Gary Barlow Jr., it will welcome little Darwin Jr. open arms. World needs more Darwins. Liverpool, it should be said, uncharacteristically open. They needed Kelleher to bail them out. A couple of fine saves. 84th minute though, Mo Salah roared halfway down the field, uses teammates as a decoy, scooped the ball past Emi Martinez, his 11th of the season, 4th straight game with a goal for Mo, and then just took a seat quite deliciously on the advertising hoarding as if to marvel at his own work and soak in at the same time the adoration of the cop who were desperate for him to do whatever the Scouse Egyptian equivalent of signed that ting is. Villa will leave believing they should have had a penalty or two. They feel Pau Torres was fouled in the build-up to the second back-breaking Liverpool goal, but I think ultimately Del Rue being so bloody wasteful, so unclinical suddenly, so wide open. Just one clean sheet, is it, this season? Seems so self-sabotagingly vulnerable, especially from their own set pieces. Both are Liverpool goals in transition. Villa, wide world like Cat Stevens. For Liverpool, Raw, one blemish on the day, Trent Alexander-Arnold limping off with a hamstring injury. Early word says it is not serious, but they just keep on keeping on. 15 wins out of 17 games this season, and we keep saying we won't see the real Liverpool until they have properly challenging run of games. Raw, they're in one, and they keep winning, and more. Top of the Premier League, top of the Champions League thingy. Only once in the past 34 seasons has a Liverpool team collected more points from their opening 11 games than they have now. And despite that, it's kind of crazy for me to even say this, but Raw, Liverpool, slots Liverpool, they still kind of have an underdog vibe about them.
Yeah, because to an extent they were written off at the start of the season, and because most people have spent the first 2 months, 3 months of the campaign saying, well, they've not played anybody yet. Let's see when they've played someone decent. You're quite right. Before the last international break, there was a sense of Liverpool's fixtures have been relatively kind. Let's see how Arne Slot's team copes with a really challenging run of games. They've now had that really challenging run of games. They've played Chelsea, they've played Arsenal, they've played Brighton, they've played Villa, they've played Leverkusen, and they have emerged, not quite perfect lead as they drew at Arsenal, but they have emerged 5 points clear at the top of the Premier League and top of the Champions League mega table as well. So it's quite hard to say, well, this Liverpool are benefiting from good fortune. I think there is a run of games immediately after this international break that is probably the truest test. And if Liverpool get through that run of games, not necessarily winning them all, because it's not realistic to set this bar where you have to win every game or you're a fraud. That's a ridiculous way to think about sport. If Liverpool can get through the run of games after they play Real Madrid, they have Man City, Newcastle away, Everton away. They can get those through those 3 games top of the league, then I think you have to say Liverpool are to be taken seriously as challengers this season. For now, it's hard to see what more Slot could do. All he can do is win those games that they're presented with. They're winning them in different ways. I didn't think they were great on Saturday night. I think the thing that kind of defined the game more than anything was Villa's negativity. I was really surprised that Villa, especially in those long spells of the game where they seemed to have Liverpool a little bit flummoxed, a little bit frustrated, slightly vulnerable, Villa didn't try and press that advantage at all. Slot said afterwards they just waited and waited and waited. Not quite sure what they were waiting for, to be perfectly honest. But Liverpool keep finding a way, and that's quite a useful trick to have.
Miguel Delaney wrote this week, he said, yeah, well, it's true, we keep saying that Liverpool need to play teams, will only know who they really are when they play teams. He said it's just as fair to say this isn't yet a real Slot team. These are the only early days of a completely new tactical approach where it feels like the main imprint so far has been broader control of possession. And he asked, what's it going to look like when Slot has the team fully in tune, or even all the players he wants? Which is, for me, and very charitable of you to throw Everton in amongst those 3 difficult games, Raw. Don't think I didn't see that. Yeah, I know you're sowing seeds of my own doom for later. But talking of new managers, Manchester United 3, Leicester City 0. Ruben Amorim, as we podcast, has just touched down with his 5 new assistant coaches in Manchester. Behold, the latest Manchester United saviour. We'll say in typical modern United style, his work visa's not ready, so there's that. But in his final game for Sporting this weekend, he came back from 2 goals down against Braga to win 4-2. Parabéns, obrigado. He leaves Sporting. I think his team are the only club in Europe in the top 6 leagues still unbeaten. I will say expectations at heights known only to Wout Weghorst. This game, then like a sweet end to the Ruud van Nistelrooy cameo, this interim era. Goals from Bruno, who's really stepped up this past 2 weeks to show his new Portuguese boss that he deserves a place in this team, even though he might not be the most obvious tactical fit. There was a wonder strike by Garnacho, a young star boy. Apparently, Bruno said after the game he's felt like some fans have lost faith in him, so he didn't celebrate. But other than that, a perfect day that ended with United fans singing if Xerxes scores were on the pitch. He didn't, so they weren't. But it was like a rare romp for a suddenly free-feeling Manchester United. Huge credit to Van Nistelrooy. Really an intriguing cameo. 4 games, 3 wins, 1 draw, 11 goals. Almost shown us what is possible with this squad. Amorim might actually have been watching Ruud Raw and thinking, yeah, you've shown a bit too much there. You made United a little bit too good, right? The uptick, the good vibes reclamation, that's meant to be my job.
Yeah, look, there's 2 ways that this goes. And the obvious conclusion, the sensible, front of the brain, everything fully engaged conclusion is Ruud van Nistelrooy's done exactly what Man United needed. He's given the fans an uplift, gave them something to believe in. Relatively kind run of fixtures, if we're all completely honest, for him to oversee. He's got the team playing together again. There's a sense of purpose and ambition. He's maybe corrected some of the more obvious tactical flaws of the latter days of the Ten Hag era. Lovely applause from the Stretford end as he took his lead from the field.
It's really beautiful.
Club hero comes in, does a job, and leaves, if anything, with his reputation enhanced. And it would make sense now if Ruud van Nistelrooy next time a decent job in Spain where he's played before, or Germany say comes up,
Everton,
Van Nistelrooy, or even in England, Van Nistelrooy would be a candidate, as he's shown in a relatively small cameo role. He's good at this. He's clearly good at this. He took a team that were a total shambles and immediately made them not be a shambles anymore. That's what should happen. But then this is Manchester United. So what will happen is that as soon as Ruben Amorim, who looks like a superb manager, comes across really well, speaks brilliantly, young, dynamic, handsome, great beard, looks like he probably has some sort of product for it.
Great beard.
You know, he ticks all the boxes. As soon as Ruben Amorim hits a difficult patch, a sticky patch, which he will because it's management and it's Manchester United and it's the Premier League, there will be a substantial portion of people who demand that Amorim be sacked and replaced with Ruud van Nistelrooy. And that will serve to, over the next 3 to 5 years, completely destabilise whatever Amorim's trying to do at Manchester United and lead to Ruud van Nistelrooy having an underwhelming 9 months in charge in about 2029.
God, why do we even watch? You've just told us what the script writers have in store. Spoiler alert. Within 6 months, Manchester United fans will be like, Ruud, we didn't used to have an official Manchester United beard wax. I long for those more innocent days, is essentially what you're saying. But we should have a quick blast on Ruben Amorim. I just love how he's not even managed for a day with a visa yet, and he's already like tempering expectations about what he can do for United, because poor dude just went and utterly slayed Manchester City in the Champions League with Sporting 4-1, and was barely allowed to enjoy that experience for a moment before being asked if that set the standard for him at United. He said after the game, this means nothing. Don't take anything from this. I mean, I don't know if he said it like that. I imagine he was probably plagued. Don't take anything from this. He said, we were lucky. It was a one-off. My poor guy is already having to brief the press that United can't play like Sporting play. And after this game, Ruud van Nistelrooy was asked whether his squad can play the preferred Amorim 3-4-3. And he chose to dodge the question completely. Amorim this weekend said, I'm not naive. I know it's going to be very different, very difficult. My God, I mean, even following Ruud van Nistelrooy makes it more difficult. Raw, give us a quick blast. Brace us for what United fans have in store. The first 2 games are admittedly kind against Ipswich. And yes, you bastard Premier League writers, against Everton.
Well, look, I think Amorim has everything you've seen from him in the last 4 years at Sporting, everything that you've seen from him certainly in the few weeks since he took the Man United job. He is young, he's ambitious, he's thoroughly modern, cutting edge. He plays the right type of football. I think the formation stuff has been overblown to an extent, but it's aggressive, it's front foot football when it can be. The thing about United not being able to play like Sporting, I think relates much more to the fact that his Sporting team quite often, particularly in the Champions League, try and pick people off on the counter-attack. I think he feels that that's not suitable for a club like Manchester United. I think what we will see in those first 2 games, and probably over the course of the rest of the season, is a very, very bright manager starting to work out a squad that has a lot of talent, but not a lot of shape. There will be lots of very good results and the occasional quite poor result. That would be my estimation of Amorim over the next, say, 7 months. And then from next summer, that's when the pressure really starts to build, because at that point, he has to turn Manchester United into something substantially better than they are at the moment.
God, so resist the headlines in the tabloids where one loss is crisis, free fall, shambles. And let's just enjoy a very intelligent man getting his head around a very, very complicated tactical and also cultural problem. Godspeed, Ruben. And talking about managers getting their heads around things, Ipswich, happy days. Tottenham 1, Ipswich Town 2. First big boy win for Ipswich. But we had no idea going in, did we? We kind of did, because Spurs had just had 2 straight League 4-1 home victories. Ange Postecoglou welcoming the league's second worst defence, 2-0 London. I think Spurs fans were salivating before this one. Should have known what that sense of drooling confidence would lead to. Because this team, I say this every week, it's one of the most enigmatic, confounding, to be candid. It's almost like the mystery box of football that you put your hand in and you don't know if you're going to get the most delicious pie in the world or just a dog turd. In this one, it was the latter, totally overwhelmed by quite brave, optimistic Ipswich, who'd come in winless, left with that sweet deserved first 3 points. 2-0 up at half-time, incredibly acrobatic. Sammy Schmodek's finish, and then the highly coveted Liam Delap doubling the lead. We did expect, let me just be candid, Spurs to come back. It's what Spurs do. Bentancur, his header seemed to signal another turnaround, but Ipswich throttled it. I was really bloody happy watching this one. I was in New Orleans watching on television, but my producer J-Dubs was over there in London with his whole family. 3 generations of American Ipswich fans. His dad, a remarkable human being, was a colonel in the American Air Force stationed just outside of Ipswich. Like so many of you military listeners that we have, for him to go must have been magic. He texted me. I'm going to read a little bit about what he said. All caps. A win 22 years in the making. He said, to witness my boyhood team win their first Premier League game in more than 2 decades live in person with my entire family is a reminder why we all as fans constantly chase that footballing high. This is a date that will be forever etched into my footballing cortex. First top flight win in 22 years with my 4-year-old son and my wife, their first Premier League games. Both of my parents, who took me to my first Ipswich game 32 years ago. He ended by saying, I hope it's not another 22 years before Ipswich win another Premier League game. But even if they do, I promise I won't complain. In that is everything that's great about football fandom. Just as happy Ipswich young manager Kieran McKenna, who'd said all this season his team deserved more from their frustrating 10 previous games without a win. But real sense of vindication for him, doubled no doubt by the fact that he begun at Spurs as an academy coach. But my God, his team in this game, in this season, they deserve this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been overdue, I would say, with Ipswich, because their form hasn't matched their performances. Their performance has been far better than the results suggested. They were slightly unlucky that their opening games included quite a lot of really difficult fixtures, and it almost. They had, all those games we talk about as being free hits for newly promoted teams against Manchester City, against Liverpool, against the real giants. Ipswich had most of those right at the start, and if you don't take any of your free hits, then all of a sudden you're 4 games in, 5 games in, and you've not won any football matches. They've come really close since then. There've been a couple of opportunities I think they'd look at and think that they've missed them, games they probably should have won. To go to Spurs though, one of the big teams, to win that game, even allowing for the fact we know Spurs are really unreliable, that they are kind of unpredictable, you have no idea which version of Spurs might appear at any given moment. To do that, for that to be your first win, your first top flight win for 22 years, that will be such a shot in the arm for those players to prove to themselves, to make them believe that they can do it, that they can compete at this level. They've shown already in their performances that they're not going to be overawed by the Premier League, but at some point you need those 3 points to kind of crystallise that feeling.
And this weekend, 3 seasons ago, Ipswich, I believe, were in the 3rd tier and were held to a draw by Cheltenham. So for that journey, when you put it in that context, to see the Ipswich fans at the final whistle bounce around, God bless. I can't imagine what that happiness feels like, but I'm delighted that other human beings get to experience it. We do need to touch upon Tottenham quickly, Raw. I mean, Tottenham, they just seem so sleepy. They seem so shattered. It's passive almost. Same team that came back from behind to thrash Aston Villa last weekend. Yes, they've gone to Turkey midweek, so there's a lot of narrative that they were tired. They lack midfield balance. There were some truly woeful performances. Guzan, my God. But that tired thing is weird. Big Ange himself said, that can't be it because we start games so sleepily, but we finish games strong. Tired teams don't do that. There's like a mental tick, the early conceding. I think this is the 13th game, 14th game at home this year that they conceded first, which is remarkable. I mean, they could have gone 3rd with a win yesterday. They end the weekend in 10th. It's tight up there in the top half of the table. Manchester City next. And poor Ange, another international window filled with regret and rumination, contemplation. This team, they're almost like that a talking heads quality about them. They've stopped making sense, Rob.
Yeah, it's really hard to know where you stand with Spurs almost, because there are weeks where you think, why would anybody doubt Postecoglou? Why would anybody want there to be any sort of change at Spurs? You can see the clear direction, you can see what he's doing, you realise that there are some risks that come with those rewards, but they're so obviously worth it. And then they go and lose 2-1 at home to Ipswich, and I don't want to offend J-Dubs because obviously I'm delighted for him, but it doesn't speak volumes for the consistency of performance, I think. I saw them against Galatasaray in the Europa League on Thursday night as well. And they were so bad defensively, Tottenham. Like, losing at Galatasaray is no great embarrassment, especially with kind of a relatively changed team. It wasn't quite the full Spurs setup. It wasn't far off, but not quite full strength. But they were just defensively all over the shop. They kept giving the ball away. They seemed naive. And you think, look, there's a point where I admire Postecoglou's principles and his ideals and all the things he wants Spurs to be. But at the same time, there's a practical level where you have to kind of stop doing that. And to lose that game and then to lose to Ipswich in the Premier League, to find yourselves 10th when you could have been in the top 4, it is tight. Postecoglou would be perfectly within his rights to say, look, a couple of minor things go a different way and suddenly we're third and everyone's talking about how we're flying. That's fair. But at the same time, those things do tend to go against Spurs. And
there's nothing fair about football, Ro.
No, that's true.
That's not. I mean, ultimately, what I'm taking from this, the impatience of football, the lack of fairness, but Godspeed. And Godspeed to Tottenham fans. That agony, we could have been third, we could have been a contender. It's one of the on the waterfront worst feelings in epic movies of all time. Stealth banger of the weekend: Brentford 3, Bournemouth 2. Tyler Adams first start in 224 days for Bournemouth. Massive on a personal level, massive for all US fans, massive for Bournemouth fans. This game answered what happens when bees and war cherries collide. It was honestly an utter barnstormer. Both of these teams, both of them just so much admirable about their organisation, their squads, their football, their managers. Incredible though. No team has bagged more home points than the Bees this season. No team has scored more goals, I think 18 when doing so. It's their road form that does them in, Raw. No points in 5 games, just night and day.
It's strange as the way Brentford sets up isn't vastly different at home or away. It's not like they're incredibly cautious or overly attacking on the road. So I guess as much as this seems like a really obvious point, I guess it's to do with how assertive teams are against them when they are at home and as opposed to when they're away. But they are, certainly at home, they've got some really good players. They're dangerous. They can hurt you in lots of different ways. They're smart. They're well run. Thomas Frank's an excellent manager. They are being very Brentford in terms of their lead position. I think they've got a goal difference of 0. They are 11th, I think. It's all very much kind of they are the Premier League's bar. So if you finish above Brentford, you've had a good season. If you finish below Brentford, you've probably had quite a bad one.
Bite your arm off to be the Premier League's bar. By the way, good job that in your next away game, Brentford, you go to Everton. Chuckles, I'm in danger. In other games, Crystal Palace 0, Fulham 2. After that stirring comeback against Brentford last weekend, fluid football did the business here. So much purring, offensive talent in that Fulham side. Sudden passing machine, Alex Iwobi, Reece Nelson, Raul Jimenez, and of course, always Emile Smith-Rowe. But it was yet again super sub Harry Wilson doing Harry Wilson things, just sauntering on, getting a big goal to wrap up the points. Fulham up to 7th place, just a point behind Arsenal. And a point behind that 4th Champions League spot. Dream, big dreams, Fulham fans. You have accrued the most points your team have in a season since 1960. Wolves 2, Southampton 0, when 19th met 20th. God bless Gary O'Neill's side. First win of the season. Cunha, such a lovely footballer. Goal and an assist in this one. 4, I think, in his last 5. Here he lashed home from distance. Really, for me, I loved this goal the most this weekend. 3 feet high and rising. Wolves' first win of the season. First clean sheet in 23 games. Southampton, I think you officially are the Daniel Jones of football. Nottingham Forest 1. Newcastle 3. In my newsletter this Friday, I dropped an article, I think from the BBC, which asked, how long can Nottingham Forest early season romp continue? And the answer was 0 games. Forest have had the start to the season, honestly, that Newcastle fans believe their team should. They took a 1-0 lead at half-time and ended up just wilting in that second half. A 3-goal, fine finish tune barrage. Newcastle really pegged Forest back in the race to become the non-Big Six team to crash the Big Six party. The Premier League Manager of the Month award curse strikes again for poor Nuno. really a reality check for him before the international break. He said, we've been punished in the way we have punished other teams. Really of a decisive second half in which it was a counter-attacking masterclass by Newcastle, and the energy of the two substitutes, Tonali and the magical Harvey Barnes. For Eddie Howe, really a lovely way for him to bring up 3 years at Newcastle, battling, sharpened teeth, showing that they're not a mid-table kind of also ran, which frankly was not what we imagined when Saudi Arabia, this debate, are they just mid-table now? When that public investment fund took over, we didn't expect that with Jose Mourinho oddly inserting himself, making heavy panting moves on the Newcastle job. This was lovely for Eddie Howe to ring up his 3 years up there in Newcastle.
Yeah, it always seems as though Eddie Howe is never more than about 2 weeks from people speculating that he's going to be sacked for reasons that never make a huge amount of sense. You look at the job he's done, and look, I mean, a football team can sack its manager just as it wants to. You know, Man City could sack Pep Guardiola, Liverpool could sack Arne Slot tomorrow and be like, well, do you know what, this is boring, let's do something else. But there's nothing in Howe's performance that suggests that Newcastle aren't moving forward. You are right, it's maybe not the kind of accelerated progress that we expected once Saudi Arabia's public investment fund had bought the club. But maybe that makes it more sustainable. Maybe Newcastle are building for a more kind of solid future.
Green energy.
Maybe they are building green, for green energy. I suspect not. But if they can have a 2, 3, 4 years where they finish between 5th and 8th, say, then by the time you are ready to mount your challenge to the top 4, to the title, then maybe you've got the kind of the squad, the experience, the battle scars that you need to sustain that. Because you can't go from 10th to 1st.
Every football fan rationally wants sustainability. That's what we all chant. Bite your arm off for some sustainability. God, wouldn't that be amazing if Eddie Howe did get fired? We want a manager that can give us an official beard wax. And talking about firing managers, finally, a game which will be remembered by absolutely no one. I'm so sure of that. I mean, not even the storehouse of knowledge wants to know this game. West Ham 0, Everton 0, in the David Moyes Memorial Derby. Really a fitting form of football for that game. I would say my mindset was bleak going into it. I'm not going to lie. Two teetering teams. Possibly the worst 90 minutes I've watched this season. Remember, I've watched Everton concede 2-goal leads twice back-to-back, and those performances were more enjoyable, less painful. West Ham really are the sound of hope burning off, and Everton's just miserable to watch, to live through, to breathe and spectate. Sean Dyche will point to just 1 loss in 7 now as a manager, but that's not why we're that. I mean, not like that, Sean. Not like this. This is not how we do it. I mean, I was in New Orleans with almost all of my family were with me. We got up really early and hung over to watch Everton together. And somewhere in the second half, my second son, Bear, said to me, and this was really beautiful and haunting, he turned around to me, Raw, and he said, I feel like we're watching a gigantic waste of time, which is an incredible turn of phrase. I was partially very proud of him, but I can't stop thinking about the pain, the inflicted pain.
Well, your guilt for making your children support Everton is well established. I would have thought this would have been quite a joyous occasion for all of you, for the entire, not just the Bennett clan, but the extended Everton universe, to finally find a club that's more steeped in misery than Everton. Surely going up against them, like West Ham are in the midst of West Ham don't even know what they want to be anymore.
Oh my God. Do they even want to be? By the way,
I don't know if they do want to be. I think
this
a lot
is not
of the fans want
how
to
I
wind
live
the
my
club up.
life. I'm not looking for. It's not who I am, Raw, anymore. I'd like to find a group of poor sods who are even worse off than we are, so I can point at them and enjoy their pain. I mean, I felt pain every time the camera scanned the West Ham faithful, Raw, and every time you could just look at people yawning or staving off sleep. I crap you not. I mean, you could see the thought bubbles over the West Ham fans being like, why are we doing this? Why are we paying money for this? Why do we come?
There was a great line from Jonathan Wilson in The Guardian, who was sent to the game and reading what he wrote, I think resented it, ultimately. He's been paid to be
even to be paid to watch that crap. You hate yourself. Is that what you're telling me?
But he put this line in saying that it is remarkable. So we know that West Ham are bad at the moment, that it's not working, they're terrible to watch. They lose more often than not, and if they don't lose, they provide like stultifying performances. And Everton, and this isn't meant to be mocking, are also not in a great moment. That's obviously true. There is no great entertainment to be had from either of these teams, and yet 60,000 people turned up to watch it, paying quite a lot of money to do so. I would say that is a sign of a sick society, to be perfectly honest. I think that is a harbinger of the apocalypse. When the aliens write how this sort of experiment called humanity ended in their alien script that's actually just kind of pictures or whatever, I think I can see them saying, the historians will start the kind of drop intro of that particular epic work of like the entire span of human history will say that you knew things would starting to go wrong, that we'd lost focus on the important things in life when 60,000 people went to the London Stadium to watch West Ham 0, Everton 0.
It is a deeply profound philosophical question, because those 60,000 were prevented from doing important things in life, like looking at memes of Gary Barlow's giant son. Get back on it. Stop watching the football. Look at the memes. Don't think about the 4 quite brilliant Jordan Pickford saves that actually kept us in this game. Everton fans, I want to speak to you for a second, because I do know there's so many of you who watch this show and then watch that crap week on week on week. And I want to say I do feel partially responsible for whatever dark cloud I've blown across your door. And here's the true agony that's looming. Let's share this reality. Everton have statistically experienced the easiest first 11 games of the season of any Premier League club, and have harvested less than a point a game. Well done us. Next 7 games include United, Ruben Amorim's United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, and bloody well Man City. This Everton season, Raw, I did watch the game, and I wrote down on the back of a beer mat in my son's house, I wrote it was just a 38-game reminder of that Philip Larkin quote, that life is slow dying. It's what we're watching. It's what we're living. At the same time, bite your arm off for a point. Raw, last question, comes in from a GFOP, Bob and Meyer from Chicago, Illinois. I'm going there this weekend. Who asks, this Premier League season feels so bloody epic. Part Penguin, part Outer Banks. The idea we've got to wait 2 whole weeks for the next instalment kills me. But professionally, how do you guys experience them? That's very nice of you to call me professional, Barbara. That is a first for me. But Raw, I'll keep you in that category. Do you love them or do you hate them just as much as we Liverpool fans do? Barbara, I'm so chuffed you call me professional. I'm going to let Raw answer this. Mentally, how do you experience the international break? Does it feel like a different child, but you love that child just as much? Or is it a chance for air for you to just rise above the waterline and take a deep cleansing breath? What do you do mentally? What do you tell yourself?
Yeah, they're quite useful actually in terms of like they serve as like calendar way markers almost, that you kind of like, right, that's this international break. I get to this international break, and these are the things that I want to have done before that. Each one is different. So some of them are the thing with international breaks, Rog. Like kids, some of them are better than others, and there are international breaks
where have no favourites.
Where there is stuff to play for, and it is really interesting. So it's. In Europe at the moment, not really, because this is Nations League qualifying. It's the Nations League and no one really cares. But in South America, say, there will come a point, maybe not this time, but certainly kind of early next year, where the games have genuine meaning and World Cup qualification is at stake and all that stuff. And then once World Cup qualifying kicks in Europe, then those games can be meaningful. And the international break this time next year will be really interesting. These ones are a bit of a holding pattern, and largely what I do is forget who's playing who, assume the Dutch are playing the Germans because they do it constantly, and work on other stuff. It's a great time to work on other stuff. You get more time with Premier League managers, for instance, in the international break than you They're
can.
bored.
Obviously. Yeah, I mean, there's only so many golf balls that can hit themselves. I will say for me, I love this United States men's national team. I really do. I love their narrative. I'm talking long-term narrative. That surging hope that we all felt back in like 2010, 2014. Can it manifest a decade later under Mauricio Pochettino? This is an amazing moment to see this team Avengers assemble. I'm not going to lie, it has been hard. It has been hard. Our recent history honestly been like a self-inflicted journey in the wilderness. We put ourselves there. I mean, I love our boys. I really do. And so I'm emphasising the positive, the renewed energy, the renewed hope. So I look at this international break. You know when you're in a city, and sometimes you like to eat in the best restaurant in the new city to understand it. And sometimes you just want to enjoy the flavour of the place, the real flavour. Sometimes, like I did in New Orleans, you just want to go to little Dizzy's Cafe and eat all the po' boys. The international break feels like the po' boy of football. And I'm so bloody excited for this pair of Pochettino games starting Thursday night, Cage, Jamaica. After which, my friend Brendan Hunt of Ted Lasso fame and I will go live on YouTube with you, dear listeners. Come and join us. Subscribe to our YouTube. Turn your notifications on. And Barbara, I'm actually coming to Chicago this weekend to eat all your Pequods. And I sincerely cannot bloody wait. Raw, good news. At the same time, last international break until March. That's it for this week. We'll be back with a preview of the week's international football with my friend, Mighty Hercules Gomez. We got Gabriel Martinelli dropping on YouTube this Tuesday. We're filming with a quite intriguing Wilfred Nancy, the magical Phil Parkinson of Wrexham. Also Eberici Eze this week, which I can't wait for. Huge love to you though, Raw, you Crown Prince of Harrogate.
It's been a pleasure. Enjoy your international break. It sounds like you'll be quite busy.
Just keeping myself off the street. This is Rog sending you big love. Let's not take a second of watching football, even of the international variety, together for granted. Big love and courage.